Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks, and welcome to episode 2 of our 2 episode psychedelic week. So, if you missed the first episode, I would go back and watch that. I kind of set it all up, explain how everything works, and we're doing a 31 album countdown. The, my top 31 psychedelic records from that classic psychedelic era, 1966 to into the early 70s. And just real quick review of the rules: only one record per artist, just so we have more variety. So I try to pick the most representative. I have a formula where I kind of measured, very scientific, uh, on a scale 0 to 5, how psychedelic is it, and then 0 to 5, how much do I really personally love it? Just how awesome is it? Combine those two numbers, and you get a psychedelic quotient, a psychedelic score. That's how I sort of rank these. Whatever. It's very, very scientific. Just trust me. So anyway, that's kind of how that works. So, like I said, I recommend going back and watching, because I kind of explain a little bit more what how we understand psychedelic and what that term really means and all that business. And we talked about numbers 31 through 16 in the first episode. So here we are for the second episode, where we are going to talk about numbers 15 to number 1. All right, in our psychedelic countdown. So, all right, let's get into it. At number 15, I do have, from 1967, Buffalo Springfield Again. Now, we did a Buffalo Springfield video a while back. I mean, I love this record. This is so this score is at the highest score on my personal scoring of 0 to 5. The only reason it wasn't a little higher in the psychedelic list is, yes, there's definitely there's psychedelic stuff on here, but it's not totally psychedelic. Um, Obviously, Broken Arrow, Neil Young's 6 minute kind of pastiche, is by far the most psychedelic thing on here. That's very psychedelic, and it's really cool too. Um, Bluebird, which I think is the best song on here, is I think some of the guitar in there, and then throwing in some of that banjo part at the end. There's some psychedelic tinges to that. Mr. Soul, great Neil Young rocker, it's pretty psychedelic. Yeah, so it fits. It fits. But pioneers in sort of combining country and folk elements into rock and roll, country rock, but also throwing in some psychedelic elements in there. All right, number 14 is psychedelic off the charts, and I do love this one too. 1968, Os Mutantes. Os Mutantes. From Brazil. Yes, Brazil had a psychedelic scene. Um, Kind of what they called what sort of tropically psychedelic. Man, I've tried. I think it was in the 1968 video way back when I tried to explain this. This is really hard to explain. You just got to listen to it. I mean, it's yeah. In the last video, I showed the Nuggets collection. Well, the CD is within reach here, but yeah, the Nuggets collection. Bat Macumba from this album is on there. So maybe from the Nuggets, you kind of know that. I don't know. Was that on the original Nuggets, or is it on that expanded? I'm looking at the original Nuggets here. No. So it's only on the 4 CD expanded edition from Rhino, is where Bat Macumba shows up. But it wasn't on the original Nuggets. I guess not. Anyway, yeah. I mean, they're singing in Portuguese. I don't know what they're saying. It doesn't matter. It's really out there and strange and mesmerizing, I think. I mean, um, they throw in some great melody here and there, but then it'll just go within the same song. It'll be real beautiful melodic passage, and then it'll just go off the rails with all these found sounds and it'll start sounding like a circus, and then it'll go into blues, and it'll go. It's just like it's it's. I mean, it's just like whiplash, and it just throwing all these styles, and it's really interesting. I highly recommend Os Mutantes. Well, I recommend the band. This is their debut. Their first like 4 records are really good. I mean, I love them all, but pick this one. All right. So number 13 obviously had to have some Grateful Dead on here. This is not my favorite. We haven't done Grateful Dead yet. We'll do a Dead week, but this is not my favorite Grateful Dead album at all. But it's by far the most psychedelic, and we're focusing on psychedelic music, and I really do like it. I mean, I don't dislike it. So, well, hell, you just get the album art, right? Anthem of the Sun from 1968. A little fisheye for you of the Dead. Yeah, this is a really interesting record. I'm trying to look at the title, the tracks here. I mean, some of these songs became staples in their live set. It's not stuff you'd ever hear on the radio, at least not later on classic rock radio. But that's it for the other one is on here in its original form. Caution: do not stop on the tracks. Anyway, it's so the Dead were not real happy with their first record, especially. They thought it was rushed. They didn't think it captured their essence, like they were so legendary on stage. And so here in the studio, they really tried to sort of capture their essence as best as they could. This is a fascinating record of editing because a lot of these tracks, they're longer tracks with multi parts, fade in and out from my actual songs into just like sound effects, and it really is kind of a psychedelic experience. And it's editing like they will have a segment from a live show, and then that'll just fade right into something they recorded in the studio, and then they'll go back to a live segment like from maybe a different show, and all that stuff is just all within the same song. And so it's this really kind of weaving in and out. It's a pretty fascinating process. I like it. It's not for everybody. I mean, if you're a fan of the Dead more for American Beauty and Working Man's Dead, that type of Dead, this is a different deal. All right. Yeah, number 12 from a band, but led by a guy who kind of famously didn't like hippies and didn't like the whole hippie scene. Thought hippies were kind of silly and stupid and whatever. He thought everyone was silly and stupid. Frank Zappa, right? But despite that, Mothers of Invention, before it was Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, made one of the great psychedelic records in my view, and that's of course Freak Out. So as much as he can dislike hippies and think they're silly and whatever, he made one of the great psychedelic records. One of the very first double albums too, by the way, because this was 66. Yeah, if I'm right, I think Bob Dylan, Blonde on Blonde, beat him by however many months, but this is one of the very first double albums ever, and just brilliant. I love how it progresses. It's a fascinating, you listen, a double album, like I said, but it progresses. Like the first album is real straight ahead, straightforward songs, pretty much, where he kind of subverts these classic styles like doo wop and kind of early rock and roll stuff. Kind of playing in that style, singing in that style, but with of course his Frank Zappa's weird worldviews and all that. But then as it progresses, especially into the second record, it gets way more experimental, way more psychedelic, and it's kind of this cool, almost linear progression stylistically. Anyway, one of the greats, even if he didn't like hippies. All right, number 11. I mean, maybe for the album art alone, right? Cream, Disraeli Gears. Woo, look at that. So yeah, Cream Disraeli Gears. I think this is probably their most cohesive record. Um, you know, their tightest record, and with songs like "Sunshine of Your Love," of course, and "Strange Brew," "Tales of Brave Ulysses," which I love, "SWLABR," uh, yeah, stuff like that. "We're Going Wrong," maybe. Like very, very psychedelic, obviously. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce, I think, were always pretty open to experimentation and all that. But it's cool to see Eric Clapton finally loosen up a little bit and, you know, get away from strict blues and experiment a bit. And guess what? It's great stuff. Classic record, obviously. All right, here we are and do the top 10. The top 10 for me finally. This number 10, this record is so good. I was actually listening to this when I was getting all the records out and prepping the video. God, this is so good. And this is, sometimes psychedelic records, do have a concept. Like we talked about the Who's Sell Out in the last video. Sometimes there is a story or a concept that go along with it. This is one such record. This is a band that never, made much of a dent here in the United States. Much bigger, more important in the UK. And it's our loss because it's a great band. But The Pretty Things, SF Sorrow. Yeah, The Pretty Things. This was 1968. Yeah, SF Sorrow. Great concept album, kind of following this guy's life, from birth to death. But really, just musically, God, it's so good and so creative. Not a bum track on there. Every track on here is distinctive. It's cool because it's individual songs, and so it can be listened. Each song can be listened on its own as just a great song, or it can work together as the concept record, and it's just brilliant. Highly recommend it. I should feature this on one of my cult album videos. I guess probably enough people don't know it, but anyway, maybe we'll expand on a little bit on a future cult video record or record cult video, whatever. All right, number 9. Number 9 has long been recognized as a psychedelic classic. This blew me away when I first heard it. Came out in 1967. Band from Los Angeles. Some of these are either from England or California, right? Well, I do have some Texas psychedelic here too, but now these from LA band. Um, yeah, this is a record. Oh, here, "Forever Changes" by Love, Alvin Lee and Love, right? Well, kind of early sort of mixed race band, right? Um, when that was still like a notable thing to mention. "Forever Changes." Um, yeah, so this is a record that I was a little late to. I mean, I've loved it for a long time, but I had heard about it for years and years. I always heard it kind of mentioned, in all these the great records of the '60s, whatever. This always comes up, and I just hadn't listened to it. And I remember one day I was actually out of town for work, and I had some time off, and there was a mall next, near the. Remember malls when they had record stores in malls, and I had some time to kill in this little town. I was like, let's go to the mall. And there's a record store in there. And I bought this on CD, initially. And just, okay, fine. I've always heard about this. Let's try it out. And man, I remember this vividly going back into the car and, putting the CD in. And I didn't leave. Like, I just sat in the parking lot and listened to it start to finish. And then again, blew me away. This is, God, how do you describe this? Kind of, very kind of folkish influenced, but again, also very psychedelic and brilliant. Every song on here is just brilliant. Um, I was like "Bummer in the Summer," but "Alone Again" or uh, all of it. Yeah, I mean it's one of those records that really sort of creates its own atmosphere and takes you places, and it's Again, very kind of acoustic bass, kind of folkish bass, but also a lot of psychedelic elements in there as well. Brilliant, brilliant. All right, where are we at? Number 8 is a band that I have actually mentioned multiple times. I believe I featured them in one of my cult videos. Whenever I was counting down 1968, this was in there too, or 67, 1967. So I've talked about this group multiple times. I'll try and keep it short this time because you've been watching my videos. You've already heard me go on about them. But they are home state guys. Talking about the 13th Floor Elevators, Texas psychedelic bands led by Acid Casualty, Tragic Figure, Rocky Erickson, kind of up there with Sid Barrett and Skip Spence, right? Yeah, Rocky Erickson. But the the electric jug of Tommy Hall, which I know our friend Vinyl Richie finds that very irritating. I kind of dig it, like throughout their songs. Kind of eerie though. The underrated guitar playing of Stacey Sutherland, just great stuff. I go with their second. Really, you go with their first or their second record. I go with the second one. I have it on a picture disc here, but Easter Everywhere. There they are. There's the band members. But yeah, Easter Everywhere. I find it a little more interesting than the debut, but the debut is awesome too. I'll show you that. The debut. I mean, there it is. In case you were wondering whether it's psychedelic or not, the title is The Psychedelic Sounds of the 13th Floor Elevators, right? But anyway, yeah. So yeah, just like I've mentioned before, whenever I talk about them, so the lo-fi recording really actually benefits them and makes it a lot more eerie and kind of otherworldly. Just great songs underneath the goofiness or the electric jug and the lo-fi recording and all that, but fundamentally just really good songs. I like it when they go kind of acoustic and really haunting, like Dust and their cover of Bob Dylan's "It's All Over Now, Baby Blue," just entitled "Baby Blue" on here. Beautiful, but they can also stretch out and kind of rock, sort of a garage rock type of way. I like Easter Everywhere. Also, kind of opens with that 8 minute or so. Keep wanting to say "Step Inside This House." I know that's the title of a Lyle Lovett album. Oh, "Slip Inside This House." Yeah, "Slip Inside This House." Right. All right. Anyway, I've talked about them a lot, so let's move on. Number 7, The 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus from Spirit, 1970. This is genius. This is brilliant. I talked a bit about this, I think, in my 70 video, didn't I? Probably did. I am ashamed to say I only discovered Spirit in the last year or two. I don't know where the hell, I don't know why I missed out on them. So there's always like bands like that, right? Where it's like, why have I been listening to them for like 30 years? But yeah, better late than never. I think this is their most brilliant record. It is so, it brings in a lot of psychedelic experimentation, but at root, killer songs. Featuring, of course, sort of the uh, the brilliance of Randy California on guitar and sort of leading the group. I told this story before. It's really interesting. The drummer, um, uh, total blank on his name. Editor can throw it up there. The drummer is Randy California's stepfather. It's an odd combo in a band, stepson, stepfather. But he, wish I remember his name. But anyway, he had actually been a jazz drummer. He had played with Cannonball Adderley and some pretty big jazz names before he formed this band with his kind of prodigiously talented stepson. And anyway, it's kind of interesting story. But love Spirit, and this record is brilliant. Number 6, really captures the spirit of those times. I think think one, especially out of San Francisco, 1967. They're really on the vanguard of psychedelic music, talking about Country Joe and the Fish with electric music for the mind and body. Yeah, Country Joe and the Fish. Brilliant psychedelic music. I know this is their debut. I know they put out some records that a lot of people like that came after this. I don't think anything came close to this though. God, this is so good. Yeah, start to finish, a lot of great blues elements in there, but again, psychedelic elements. Superbird is great. About LBJ. Section 43, pretty well known. It's a great instrumental jam. Um, the whole thing is great. I love the closer, Grace. Beautiful song, haunting song. It's Country Joe McDonald, or Joe McDonald. Grace Slick of Jefferson Airplane was sort of his muse for that song, Grace. It is a gorgeous song. But all right. Number 5. This is another album. Actually, I featured this album on one of the cult videos as well, so I won't spend too much time on it. But The Small Faces, Ogden's Nut Gone Flake from 1968. Now, this is a reissue, obviously, because the originals actually came in this circular packaging, which would be kind of cool to have. But this is a reissue. Whatever. Brilliant record. The Small Faces, led by Steve Marriott, and of course, Ronnie Lane, Ian McLagan, Kenny Jones. Famously, Steve Marriott would leave, join up with Peter Frampton, Humble Pie later, and Ron Wood and Rod Stewart would come in and become the Faces, a very different band. But love them both. Love the Small Faces. Love the Faces. But I think the Small Faces are a little more experimental under Steve Marriott's leadership, and I think this is their masterpiece. Now, again, I really explained the story in that cult video. You can go back and watch that. But side 2 is this sort of concept piece, tracing the adventures of Happiness Stan, and his quest to put the moon back together. Side 1 is just kind of just individual songs. Side 1 actually, to me, just blows me away. Lazy Sunday is probably the most famous song on there, but I think Afterglow is just so great. It's a great song. All right, number 4. Of course, I had to have Pink Floyd on here. I'm gonna admit to something here. I actually prefer the second record, Saucer Full of Secrets. This is just one of those records I love, but I mean, come on. It's got to be this. Right? Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Syd Barrett's one record with he's on a few tracks on Saucer Full of Secrets, but he was really already gone by then, figuratively, if not physically. But their debut, is Syd Barrett's masterpiece. Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Syd Barrett, when he had it together, was a brilliant songwriter, brought this sort of childlike innocence into, which is, it can be a big element in psychedelic music, but there was always this sort of underlying kind of menace and madness in there, which unfortunately turned out to be true for Syd Barrett. Lucifer Sam is such a great song. Of course, opening with Astronomy Domine, or Domine, how do you say that? Take up thy stethoscope and walk. And of course, Power R Talk H, which the psychedelic freak out. No, I'm sorry. Interstellar Overdrive is what I meant to mention. Bike, brilliant closer. Yeah, I mean, just, I mean, British psychedelic music at its finest, obviously, and a legendary record for a reason. Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Okay, top three are obvious. I guess they should be. And ones I've talked about already in other videos. So that's what kind of happens when you go on for a while and you cover some of these other topics. They might sort of overlap with stuff you already talked about. So I'll make this quick. Got to have the Beatles in there. Here's my Beatles pick. Um, I mean, there's obviously several you could put in. There is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, obviously, that I featured way back when, not only in my Beatles video, but in my albums that I don't like as much as I'm supposed to. Yeah, got some slack on that, or flack on that. Revolver, I mean, brilliant masterpiece Revolver. You could pick that. But no, the one I picked for the Beatles on this list, the Magical Mystery Tour. I think it is they're most obviously psychedelic. So that's kind of why I went with that. And the story behind this, right? This is the only American release that is still kind of considered a official canon, in the because as you know, we've generally kind of gone with the UK releases now, but this is the only American release that kind of slips in there as part of that official canon, right? Because in the UK it was released as a couple of EPs, and then there's some singles. It was brilliantly put together in the United States as this one full album, and I think this is how most people listen to it now. But I mean, Magical Mystery Tour, Fool on the Hill, Flying, which I love, such a great little instrumental. Blue Jay Way, Your Mother Should Know, I Am the Walrus, of course. Hello, Goodbye, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, Baby You're a Rich Man, All You Need Is Love. I mean, just that track listing is psychedelic at its finest, right? Although I got two records higher. We just did a Jimi Hendrix week, so go watch that because I talk at length about this record and that. But yeah, my number two has to be Are You Experienced, the debut. I go with the US version over the UK version. UK version is a little bluesier. I think the US version a little more psychedelic, both musically and obviously the cover art, definitely. But yeah, I mean, we just talked about this, so go watch the Hendrix videos if you want to spend some time talking about it. And fairly recently did a video on this band too. But my number one pick shouldn't be a surprise. If you haven't seen them in the 1 through or 30 through 2, they got to be here. 1967. I think this is the quintessential psychedelic record. It one, it's just brilliant songs. Two, really takes you to that time period. I think creates this mood. But we talked about it fairly recently. But Jefferson Airplane, Surrealistic Pillow is my pick for the greatest psychedelic record ever. Yeah, she has funny cars, uh, 3/5 of a mile in 10 seconds, embryonic journey, plastic fantastic lover. I'm leaving out the three big songs for me. This was the first. This is their second record, right? And it's the first record with Grace Slick when she joined the lineup. And from her previous band, Great Society, she brought two essential songs with her that the Jefferson Airplane kind of worked on and worked out. Being Somebody to Love and of course White Rabbit, which may be the ultimate psychedelic song. I don't know. But for me, as I said in my Jefferson Airplane video, my favorite song on here is Today. I think Today is beautiful, haunting Marty Balin ballad. Just takes you to another place. I think it's gorgeous. But anyway, taken together, I think this is the greatest psychedelic record. Well, all right, guys, we made it. The psychedelic video. Oh, I guess we ought to close out with Psychedelic Week comes to a close. And that was my 31 picks with the rules, with the caveats, of course. So in the comments, now that you've seen the whole list, did I leave anything out? What do you guys think? What are your favorite psychedelic albums, at least from this original psychedelic era from 66 to somewhere in the early 70s, wherever you want to cut it off. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed Psychedelic Week. These are two episodes that I've been wanting to make since we started this channel, so I'm finally glad we finally kind of got it in there. Please do subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. Hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, all of that great stuff, and we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks.